Hello, legends. So as you may already know, we already built out a DIY AI caller using OpenAI to manage the conversation and using Deepgram for text-to-speech and speech-to-text. In video one, I showed you how to do that, how to deploy it, how to get everything working for yourself. But in video one, we just made an inbound caller. So you could just call it and it would answer basic FAQs. Now, a really good use case here would be to do outbound calls, like that's the other half of the puzzle, and then to also do function calling, the other half of the puzzle, or the other third of the puzzle. There's 3/3 in this entire system. So yeah, in video one, it was just 1/3. We just did inbound calling, but now, jokes aside, for video two, we're going to be doing outbound calling and function calling as well. So we're running the code is going to be run on Replit. And we're going to be running the outbound call mechanism that's going to trigger the outbound call from make.com. We're just using a basic HTTP module, which you can plug into your Google Sheets, and then you can just call your list of leads as they come in. So that's fantastic. It's so easy to manage the outbound calls. And for function calling, we're going to be doing pretty much any function call you want. But for this specific video, I'm going to give you resources on how to book someone into Google Calendar. So if you want to use this as an appointment setter, then you can actually just take all the resources. I'm going to make them available on Gumroad. You can take all the resources and just run this, after watching this video, within 10 minutes, make your own outbound AI caller. So it's going to have the same cost. So in video one, it was roughly 1 cent per minute. Just to give you some more details on that, it was like, I think 0.88 of a cent for the actual API text-to-speech and speech-to-text. And then for the the OpenAI portion it was under 1 cent per minute, but that's how the cost breakdown was. It was like 0.88 of a cent for Deepgram, and then it was less than 0.1 of a cent for OpenAI, but I just said 1 cent, so it's actually cheaper than that. And for latency, so it is pretty fast. It's like a second, maybe a second and a half. With function calling, it's a little bit longer because the function calling we're using make.com, it's not streaming. But you could make this faster by, there's a section of code, which is the text to speech with Deepgram. I'm just using a regular API call for that. And I'm kind of chunking it down in a specific way to kind of deliver that faster, but you can make that streaming as well. And aside from that, all the other code that we're using is all streaming. But if you wanted it faster, like lower latency, then the text to speech, and I'm going to show you when I start the video, like the actual tutorial, you can make that streaming, you can make it faster as well. But anyway, let me demonstrate how this works. So I'm just going to trigger a phone call from my make.com. Let me put my phone on loud so you can actually hear it as well. Let's trigger the call.
Hi Bart, this is Sophie from Bart's Automotive. I'm reaching out to assist with booking your car service. Our next available slot is Monday, 9 December 2024 at 9 a.m. Would that work for you?
Yeah, that's amazing. Let's book it in.
Let me check the availability and book that service time for you. You're all set. Your car service is booked for Monday, 9 December 2024 at 9 a.m. Have a great day, Bart.
Thank you very much. See you later. Okay, so as you saw, I got called, I picked up, and then I was booked in for a meeting in Google Calendar. Okay, so let's just see how all this works. So in this video, at a high level, I'm going to show you both make.com scenarios. I'm going to explain how they work. I'm going to show you how to plug it into Replit and how to deploy Replit. So 10 minutes after you finish watching this video, you grab the resources and you have your own outbound AI caller. Okay, let's get into it. All right, so the first thing you want to do is go ahead and watch this video. So this is the part 1 video of how to build the DIY AI caller. And in this video, I actually show you diagrams of exactly like what's going on in the code. So we're going to see that there's a bunch of different files in this code, and the core files were explained in video 1. And I'm not going to go over them in this video just to kind of keep this as short and as on topic as possible. But definitely go ahead and watch this video. You can watch it at like 1.5 or 2x speed just to get the general overview if you haven't watched it already. But if you have watched it, let's go across to Replit and check out the code. So in different videos for AI callers, I use this sequence that we generate the call from make.com for outbound calling, and we essentially use these two components here. So make.com will trigger into here, which is the /outgoing call webhook, and then it's going to basically initiate the Twilio call using this webhook, and then it's gonna plug into our incoming call webhook. Yeah, basically there's two parts on how to start this outbound call, which is different to the video one for inbound call. And this is that specific section here. And what we're doing is we're essentially using a HTTP module that's going to be triggering the outbound call. And within this module, if I just open it up, we have a first message variable, and then we have the phone number that we're going to be calling. And this first message variable contains, like at a high level, your actual prompt for this, for OpenAI is going to be like the personality, the overall task to be done. And then the first message is what's going to have the more personalized information. So at the start of this video, I said you can use like a Google Sheets module here, and you can watch for new rows that are added to the Google Sheets. And then you would plug it into here and just call that, call that customer. In that Google Sheet, you might have the person's name, the person's phone number, what they were inquiring about, or if you have a lead form, maybe you have certain criteria that you need to check. So you'll take the variables from this Google Sheet and you plug them into this first message. So you might have, you're calling the customer Bart, and this might be that person's name. Sorry, this might be that person's name. Over here, I've got, you're calling for you're going to offer this first appointment slot of Monday, 9th December. Again, you can just replace this with the variable from that Google Sheet. So this is where you customize it specific for that customer. So your overall prompt for OpenAI is in Replit. That's that's not generic. It's like the generic prompt, so to speak. And this is the more personalized prompt. That's how I was called. I was, referenced by name immediately. I could have put into here that, hey, you're going to be calling Bart, who wants to get a turbo upgrade for his 1999 Subaru WRX. And then I would have been, hey Bart, this is Sophie from Bart's Automotive calling about your turbo upgrade for your 99 WRX. So you can, you basically could really personalize it here, and that's what you want to do. This is the same method that I use for the real-time API caller. So if you watch those videos too, this is the exact same sequence for first message and phone number. But yeah, that's what you want to do here. And then going back to Replit, that's what happens here. So we're targeting this outgoing call in the HTTP module in the URL that we're using. We're targeting this specific entry point. And what are we doing over here? We're actually taking there we go, first message and phone number. So we're taking this from the request body, and then we're passing it through into this Twilio. So we're going to be using the Twilio response to actually create the connection between Twilio and our server, which is this Replit code. And when we're doing that, we're passing those variables of first message and caller number. So first message is that first message that we saw, that customized message that we built out on make.com. And then caller number is that person's phone number that we're going to be calling out to. And we do this because this code has a bunch of different components in it, like this app.js file. So just because we threw in the person's, like that first message and the phone number into here, it doesn't mean that whatever is here, it's going to be accessible here or accessible here. So that's why we have to basically create some kind of continuity between first message and number between this entry point, then to this webhook we have to pass it as well, and then to this webhook we have to pass it as well. And once we get into this webhook here, this is where the actual phone call starts, and we're actually managing the actual conversation with the person. So we have the incoming messages to Twilio. Okay, so the real thing that we want to look at is this first message here. So we're taking that first message that we received from make.com, that's the personalized message, and we're sending it across to our GPT service. So once again, watch that first video for a full so you understand what's going on here. I'm gonna assume you've watched that, and I'm gonna be speaking at level 2 here. So the GPT service, which generates our responses that are then sent to Deepgram for conversion into speech. We're ingesting in that first message, and we're essentially saying, hey, AI assistant, you're about to start speaking with Bart. He's you're going to be calling him to book him for a service, whatever we had in that first message. And then at the end of that message, I had, okay, you're starting the conversation now. That's why that first message was really like, hey, Bart, this is Sophie. Let's get you booked in. So that's what we're doing here, just for that first message to, basically ingest that personalized prompt, and then to get that personalized first message and kind of steer the conversation towards a certain direction. So that's what we're doing there. Everything else pretty much stays the exact same. Now, the other core changes are they take place in GPT service, and then in this functions folder where we have book service and function manifest. So the GPT service, this is where we're running our OpenAI configuration. So we're managing the conversation. And we've got some changes introduced here where we're introducing function calling. So there's a couple of snippets of code that are different. If you really want to break this down, you can go to that first video. So this video that we had over here. You can go to this video, download the resources from Gumroad, and then compare them to these upgraded resources if you want to just learn a little bit more about what's going on. But at a high level, we are introducing function calling. We've adjusted our prompt to also say, hey, when a customer, when we're booking in the service, use the function calling, or use the function that's called book service over here, which is the same name as book service over here. But we're defining that in the function manifest. I'll get to this in a second. So that's what we're doing over here. And then we have some of these snippets are also updated to accommodate that function calling. And yeah, this is where we're kind of looking at, do we need a function call or not? So yeah, that's where we're kind of getting our tools and calling our book service. So if you wanted to increase the function calling, like to add more functions to here, you would just copy this entire code as it is. You would just take it into, Claude or ChatGPT and say, this is the raw code that I have. You don't even have to say, you don't have to give it too much context. You can just say, this is the raw code that I have. I want to add another function that does, we got book service. I want to add, I don't know, whatever else you want to add. And it'll be able to return the entire code for you, including those additional snippets for additional function calls. So just like any OpenAI function call, really you need this kind of configuration here. So this is the function calling manifest. And to keep this relatively clean and easy for us to understand and work with, we have a function manifest file. And if you've worked with functions before, then you would know that this is the typical kind of structure of a, for tool calling. And this is just for booking a service. So that's what we were booking at the start of the call into Google Calendar via make.com. So you would set up the actual configuration here. And if you had other functions, then again, put this into ChatGPT and say, hey, add another function for X, Y, and Z. And you would essentially just duplicate it and paste it underneath here with all your new criteria that you need. So that's the function manifest. And then the final stage of a function call is the actual specific function call itself. And as you can see, once again, like breaking it down into separate function calls as separate files, it's so much easier to split it out than have a super, super long OpenAI code here that does function calling, has the manifest, has all the separate function calls. When you can isolate it like this, it's much easier to kind of, find out what could be going wrong. You can put certain logging into here, but also just as from a management point of view, you could quickly glance over your function calling or the specific function that you might want to change or update or remove, and you can just work on it at a file basis, at a file level. So over here, I'm just defining my webhook into make.com. Okay, so over in make.com, this is the actual Google Calendar scenario. There's another video that I'm going to link that goes over this scenario. I explained it in the real-time API outbound caller video. So I'm going to link that somewhere here, or I'll put it into the description of this video. And I go over each module bit by bit. I'm not going to do that too much here. I'm not going to go in so much depth. So if there's anything that you think I'm missing, watch that other video as well. But before I get into this, at a high level, we have the, there we go. At a high level, we have this webhook, which is the entry point. And all you need to do is create a webhook here, copy the address to your clipboard. And then over in Replit, this is the actual URL that we're going to be using here. So we're defining an endpoint for this function call, which is pretty much how you make any function call. You need a URL to send something to. And at a high level, by the way, a function call is just an API call. There's just a specific structure that you need to follow when you use an LLM to process this API call for you. But a function call is an API call. So if you can just think of that at a high level of, all right, every API call needs to have a, like it's going to be a post request, for example. So it's going to be sending data to a certain point. Every API call needs a URL. Every API call needs to have a method attached. So it's like a post or a get. And every API call needs some form of data to be sent across. So that's what we're doing over here. We're defining our URL, which is the make.com webhook. and we're sending our data, which is the phone number from the person that's calling, and that's the unique identifier. So like, let's say we didn't just want to do a Google Calendar booking, but we wanted to add some certain notes around the person that's calling us. We wanted to add extra notes into HubSpot. Then you would need that unique identifier, which is the phone number, and then you could reference the customer in HubSpot by using their phone number to find them or to associate notes with them. So typically you always want to send the phone number across to your endpoint if you want to do some kind of customized API call. And then we're also sending the booking time. And the booking time is what you would have heard on that call, which was 9th December at 9 a.m. So these are our two arguments that are going into make.com, and I'll explain that in a second. And then we're processing the response as well. Again, typical API call, you send some data, something happens on the other end, and then you get a response back. So we're processing that response. And for our specific sequence, we can either get a successful response that it was booked in, or an unsuccessful response, which is going to include an alternative booking time for our specific scenario. That's what we've basically set up here. So this is the function call. It's very basic. All function calls should be very similar to this. So you can just copy this, put it into ChatGPT and say, cool, I want to make a function call that interacts with this specific URL endpoint. I want to send this specific data. This is how the response data is going to look. Can you parse that response data so that we can actually continue with this sequence? So once again, the URL is here, the data that you're sending is here, and then the way that you process that response data is here. And if I was to do this, then just to give you a high level idea is, of course, you need the URL from the inbound webhook. But over here for the webhook response, this is what's actually going to be sent back across to our, in the response of our function call. And if I open this up, you can see that I've created this specific response body, which is status successful, and then booking message. And that booking message is just saying that's like the exact same time that we sent into this sequence to say, hey, is this available? Then if it's successful, we just send the message back saying, yep, that time is successful. But if this was me trying to create a new function call, I would just copy this and paste it into ChatGPT and say, this is the response that we're getting. This is what we need to parse. And that's like even for regular API calls. When I'm making API calls, I will literally take the response, let's say you're doing a Zendesk API call or a cal.com API call. Every API documentation is going to include the structure of the API call, most likely in different languages. So you might have one that's in Python, one that's in JavaScript. You might have one that's just a regular, like a curl request. So you could just take that and say, this is the API call that I want to make. And then every documentation will typically have the sample response. So when you make that API call, how does the data, how is it structured on the way back? So I'm kind of going into it a little bit too deeply there. You should already know how to make an API call, or you can just use ChatGPT to make it for you. But yes, you just copy the API response, paste it into ChatGPT and say, this is what we need to process. So over here, to basically show you, the previous status here was successful, but the status over here is unsuccessful. And then for the booking value, we have for the booking key, so the key value pair, which is booking. The booking value is this rebook, which is basically a response from the ChatGPT module that says, sorry, that time is not available. Here is an alternative time. Do you want to book it in? So yeah, this flow at a high level just checks for busy times. If the time that we've suggested is available, we'll book it in and send the response back saying, yep, it's booked. If it's not available, we'll find another alternative time, and then we'll send a response back saying, it's not booked in, but here's another time that we could use. That's why we have this little mechanism here in case you want to make any edits to this. And honestly, at a high level, you probably need to make edits to this. This is suitable for my specific booking function, but if you want to make a more complicated booking system for your customers, then this is going to be used as a basic start template. So you might need to change this, and you might need to change some of this stuff here as well. But that's pretty much everything. So at a high level, and I'll go into the environment file in a second, but at a high level, the key changes to the code are, we introduced this sequence over here, which is outgoing call. This is what we trigger in make.com. Then we're getting these custom values of the person's phone number and that custom first message, aka custom prompt. And we're passing it through when we're creating our connection for the Twilio phone call. And that's what we have over here. So we're taking the first message and the number, and we're passing it through in these parameters here. And then we capture those parameters over here. So we have the first message and the caller number. And then we're feeding that first message into the GPT service, which once again is our OpenAI, which manages the conversation, kind of generates all the text that we then convert into speech using Deepgram. And that's what's happening over here. So that's like, those are the key changes here. GPT service, yeah, once again, we're introducing function calling, but we're doing like separation of concerns. So we've introduced function calling over here. We've established that, hey, for booking, we need to use the function calling, which is called book service. And we've also added these code snippets over here to basically determine, is a function call necessary? If it is, which function call do we need to use? The function manifest, which is going to contain all the separate configuration of tools that we're going to be using for our app. So yeah, you might have 5 separate function calls. So you would just list them all here one by one. So you would just copy this and get it duplicated for your other function calls. And then each of your next function calls, like the actual specific call itself, AKA the API, like the API call, they're all going to be listed out again under this functions folder as the separate files. Now for the environment variables, the server URL, which is, again, if you watched video 1, you would know how to make this, but I'll show you how to do this anyway. So the server is just the URL of this specific Replit server. So when we deploy this, this is just that URL. And we have the OpenAI API key, which is what we need for the GPT service. Then we have the Deepgram API key, which is what we need for the transcription and text-to-speech services. And then we have our Twilio account SID and Twilio auth token. And then the from number, which is the phone number from Twilio that we're using to place the outbound call. And yeah, I'll go into this in just one second, but while we're here, the voice model, this is just the Deepgram voice model that you can get from the Deepgram docs. So how do you get the Twilio account SID and Twilio auth token? So these two values over here. If you're inside the Twilio console, in your home page, you have the account SID, so you could just copy it and then paste it in. And then your auth token, you can just copy it and paste it in. And now to get your from number, you just have to find that number that's like whichever one you want to use to place the call, you just find that. So I've got numbers for United States and Australia. I'm in Australia, so I use Australia for my demo calls. So I'm going to click Australia, phone numbers, manage active numbers. And then my outbound phone number is this Melbourne, Victoria one. So I'm just going to copy this value and I have to include the plus. So whatever it is, every phone number has a plus at the start of it. Make sure you copy that entire number and then you paste it into here. So it has the plus at the start and then the actual number with no spaces in between. So once again, this is the from number. So when we actually trigger this outbound call and then you look at your phone, the number that it's calling from is that Twilio phone number. So if you want to call people in America, you'll buy a Twilio number that has calling capability for America. And that's what your customers will see. So let's say you also operate in New York City, make sure you get a New York area code phone number. So when your customers pick it up, they're like, okay, I'm in New York City. I'm getting a call from New York phone number because they can see by the area code. Same thing if you're in any other city, then you kind of want to do the same thing. So we have our credentials set up here. Now, before I show you how to deploy this, I'm going to go back into make.com and I'm going to give you a high-level overview of this calendar function. So the calendar booking function, you can download this and you can go through all the different prompts and look at all the different settings, but at a high level, we are receiving a payload from our Replit code, which is going to contain, if I just go back into here, it's going to contain the phone number from the user that we're called, as well as the booking time. And this is our booking mechanism here. So we've established that we want to send this specific payload across to make.com. And that's what we're receiving over here, phone number and then the suggested time. Next, we have a tool that's going to set the current time. And we're doing this because when we use certain GPT modules and we're asking for dates and times, we're going to be feeding in this context, basically saying today is, in my case, Sunday, 8th December at whatever time. And then these GPT modules are going to understand that, this is the current time. Because I think they're all preset right now to 2023. So if you didn't feed in the current date and time, it's going to be like looking at last year's time, which is not going to work for your Google Calendar module. So that's what we're doing over here for this ChatGPT step. Now, the Google Calendar module uses UTC. I'm not specific, I can't remember off the top of my head which UTC it uses, but that's just like a specific time zone. So what we're doing is, we're creating a JSON object that's going to contain the start and end times for our Google Calendar module that we're going to be using to search for availability. And over here, we're feeding in our actual message from here, which is the proposed time. And then we're also feeding in the current time. So we're saying, hey, the proposed time is 9th December 2024. By the way, today's date is 8th December 2024. And now ChatGPT has context of the actual current date and the proposed date. So we're taking this, we're getting some suggested start and end times. We're parsing the response from here to split up those variables into start and end so we can access them individually. And then for Google Calendar, we're placing them in start date and end date. And then we're, just plug in your certain calendar and we're gonna check the availability for this specific day. So this function overall, really what it does is it just looks at one specific day. So if you wanted to look at day by day, like you check today, it's not available, you wanna check tomorrow, you'll have to increase the functionality of this by yourself. But it should be very intuitive on how to do that because I think make.com is super easy to kind of build any automation that you want. So that's what we're doing over here. And this is a get busy information, get free busy information. So this is gonna return all the times that are busy, I'm pretty sure. I kind of made this about like 1 or 2 weeks ago. I've made different versions, so I'm kind of remembering, it is the busy information. We're then parsing the response. Okay. So over here, we're taking all the separate busy slots, because it's going to be an array, and we're taking that array of busy slots and we're converting them into a single variable that we can then pass into ChatGPT steps. So we can't just take the dynamic array that can have maybe 1 busy time or 3 or 5 busy times, because these modules won't accept arrays. We have to convert it into one single data point that we can then use in different places. So we're taking this busy time, and then in this ChatGPT module, we're going to be comparing the proposed time that we sent from Replit that we received in this webhook against the busy time string, which is going to contain all the busy events. So if it's completely open on that day, this is going to contain 0 times. Or if there's already 5 different meetings, it's going to contain the start and end times of those 5 different meetings. So this GPT module is essentially going to be looking at, okay, this is the proposed time. Does it clash with any of the busy times? AKA, is this free at all on a day? And if it is free, we're going to get an accept as an output. And if it's not free, we're going to get a deny as an output. So what's going to happen here is the actual response output is going to be a sequential output where you're going to see part 1, the ChatGPT converts the Melbourne, Australia time, which is my time zone that I'm in, into the same time format as what was output from Google Calendar, which is like UTC something. It's going to convert it, and then it's going to check for the availability. And then at the very end, after like step 3 or 4, it's going to say accept or deny. Once we have the accept or deny, we have these 2 filters here. The first filter is set to search for the sequence that has accept. And if it's accept, it means that the proposed time is actually available on the calendar, which we're then going to be booking in over here. So if we look at this module, just so I can remember what it was for, current date, convert the following time into UTC. Okay, so all we're doing here, once again, we're taking that Melbourne time, converting it into UTC so that we can use it in our Google Calendar, which I think uses UTC as well in that case. And we're setting our event name to be new booking for, and we've got the customer's phone number from this webhook that we've passed in from our Replit function up there. And we're setting our start date, date and time. So it might be like 9 a.m. on the 9th December. And then the duration. So I can actually set an end date as well, like an end date and time. But you can just set your duration over here to be 1 hour. So if this starts at 9 a.m., your duration is going to be till 10 a.m. And then we're parsing that response. We're passing the information to Google Calendar, which we just spoke about. And then our response to the webhook So the API call that we placed in Replit, that function, that book service function call, is now going to get a successful status. And the booking is just going to be that original time that we got from this webhook once again, which is the original time that we got from the function call. And we're just doing that to kind of close the loop on the entire system, where we're saying, okay, if it's successful, then we're sending this message. So successfully booked your service for Monday, 9th December at 9 a.m. And this is how we generate that response back to the user. And if I go back into here, so for pathway number 2, if it's busy, we're looking for the result from here that contains the word deny, because we've told this to look at accept and deny. And then we're looking at basically, I think here we're finding an available time. Yep, you received information from the slot. Okay, and here we are. Well, basically, once again, every single time we have to convert the original time that we have, because I'm in Melbourne AU time, into UTC time. So whatever time you're in, if you're already in UTC, no big deal, it works for you. But you can just typically say, yep, I'm in, I don't know, New York, USA, converted to UTC time. So ChatGPT is obviously very good for this because it's dynamic. You don't have to do too much thinking about this. But one comment I will make is that all of these calls, they will take a couple of seconds each. So any LLM processing is not instantaneous. But if I've never really looked if you can use streaming responses in make.com. You might be able to, I'm not sure. But that's why, whenever you're in ChatGPT and you're having a conversation and you hit enter, and then you can see that the ChatGPT is generating a response like letter by letter or word by word. Technically, if it takes 3 or 4 seconds for it to generate all that text, that's how long we have to wait for this API call to be completed. We have to wait until the entire response is generated before we can take the next step. In our code, we're actually using streaming responses. So if I go to GPT service, I think somewhere here we have the configuration that you can see stream equals true. So for these GPT responses, we're actually streaming the response to that next component while it's coming back to us, kind of like a pathway. We're just fully opened. We're not blocking it until we have the entire response and then sending it. We're just letting it flow seamlessly through. But in make.com, that doesn't happen. So yeah, the more of these LLM steps that you have, the longer it'll take to process. So if you ever are thinking okay, how do I reduce the latency even more for function calling, then just be aware that these LLM steps do impact that. So at a high level for us, some of these steps that we're using are just trying to convert Melbourne time to UTC time, and then to establish a start and end time. You can run that all using straight logic. So if you had JavaScript instead, if you had a JavaScript block here, which I think you have to pay for, but yeah, if you had a JavaScript block over here, you can write a custom function that will take your specific time and send it in UTC. Or if I wanted to, I could actually convert that in my function over here. I could probably go to book service, and then somewhere up the top, I could create a mini function that would basically take that proposed time, it would convert it into UTC. And then when I passed it through, I wouldn't have to, I wouldn't have to initially convert anything across. So yeah, there's obviously a lot of optimizations you can make. I'm kind of just releasing this, as fast as possible as an MVP for you to build on. That's what we're doing here. We're creating that, we're finding that any available slots on that same day. So we're going to say, cool, 9 a.m. is taken, but how about 10 a.m.? And over here, we're actually generating, we've got a JSON object that we're generating the response message that we're going to be sending back in our webhook response. So this is where we say, sorry, 9 a.m. is not available. How about 10 a.m.? Then we're parsing that response from here using this parse JSON module. And then we're taking that parse response and plugging it into this webhook response. That's why you have this little rebook variable here, which once again was generated from here. So that's how this works at a high level. This is pretty dynamic. If you have a client that uses very unique or strict booking mechanisms for their own calendar, then make.com, you can build off this and have a really comprehensive, very nuanced booking system. And all that complicated stuff is obviously managed in make.com. And this, once again, this is used for both we take the initial time, we check if it's available. If it is available, we book it in. But if it's not, then we're going to suggest an alternative time. So you can see that this one scenario in make.com handles both sequences of check availability and then book it in. So yeah, it's actually pretty good. So we've gone over the code, we've gone over the environment variable, environment file. We've also gone over this function calling in make.com for booking a service. And now what I'm going to do is just show you how to deploy this. So if you're ever just trying to test this out and you don't want to deploy it, and you're not ready to deploy it, you could just hit run over here, and this is going to generate a development URL that you could use to actually test this system out. So I've just hit run, and over here, if I click this open, this is the development URL. So this development URL you would use in this outbound call function. So sorry, in this outbound call module. So if I click this open, you can see over here that I have a URL, and then I have .dev and then / outgoing call. So that outgoing call, like I mentioned before in that app.js file, that's where we were basically sending this payload of information into that outgoing call webhook in Replit. But this is where that URL is. So that this is the development URL that we just had, and that's what we're pasting it into here. And over in Replit, if I go to this env file once again, this is that development URL. Now, in the first video, I mentioned that when you do use the development URL, if I just Control V it here, you have to remove the start of this, which is the HTTPS and these /, and then you have to remove the trailing / as well. So now we have the URL that we're placing into here. So if we want to deploy this, I'm just going to hit stop. I'm going to go up to here, hit deploy, set up your deployment. I just use the default settings every single time, and I'm going to hit deploy. And this is going to take a few minutes to deploy. So while we wait, and I might pause the video and come back to kind of speed this up, but you don't need to change anything in Twilio. So we've already taken the key variables that we needed from Twilio, which is the Twilio account SID and the auth token, and then the from number. So the number we're going to be calling the customer using. So we don't actually have to go into Twilio, go to the number and kind of set up any webhook stuff there. This is strictly for outbound calls. So everything is set up here and in make.com. So I'm going to pause the video and I'm going to come back once this is finished. All right, so we've just finished deploying. So now what we're going to be doing is we're going to take this URL. So I've just clicked open there, and I'm going to copy this, go back to make.com, and now we have to replace this development URL, which is just used for testing, and we're going to backspace that and paste in our deployed URL. So now this deployed URL is going to be always accessible. This is basically, it's always on, and whenever we trigger this, like let's say you have that Google Sheet plugged into this HTTP call, and every time a new row is added of a customer that you need to call, as soon as you call, that thing is going to be on, like the Replit's going to be on, and it's going to place that call for you. So we've deployed it. This is the deployed URL that we're using, and you just have to click OK so it saves to it. We're going to come back to here and actually trigger another phone call so you can see. And then we have to go over here. We have the server. I'm going to paste in the URL, and I'm just going to modify it. So I'm going to backspace this, take this, and paste it into here. Okay, awesome. So we're actually using this. Now, I just need to confirm actually, because app.js, so in the first version of this code, we had to take the URL for this Replit app and leave it in the environment file so that we can actually place the outgoing call. So I'm not sure if the code that I've done here, again, I kind of wrote this recently. Sorry, no, I didn't write this recently. I wrote this component recently. This code, just to be clear, this is like Twilio has a dev account on GitHub, and I found that they had inbound and outbound calling for a custom caller using OpenAI and Deepgram. Their overall code is absolutely fantastic, but it's also pretty complicated if you're relatively new to this stuff. So I'm just trying to democratize what they've done. So this is probably 80-90% Twilio code, and then the remaining 10-20% is just me trying to simplify it, or put my own function calls into here because it's my example. So yeah, for this, since I changed the start of this, I can't remember if we needed this environment file to also have this deployed URL. Yeah, but just for kind of we'll just leave it like that, just so we use it. But let me see here, from number, request headers. We might. Okay, yeah, we still need it. Okay, so this server here is this. Is this URL over here. So that's why we have to actually use this as well. Oops, let me just backspace that. We have to use this URL because we're setting the address for this server. So when we're creating the call, over here to create the stream, the media stream for Twilio, that's how we're getting the actual server URL over here. So over here, we're doing it in a different way. We're basically using the headers from the API call, from this API call that forwarded into here, and the headers contain the URL that we're using, either the deployment URL or the development URL. So that's what's happening over here. So if I was to make this code a little bit more efficient, then I would just kind of make everything consistently, either use this server URL that we're using from the environment file, or I would just use the headers. So yeah, there's a lot of efficiency to be made here. Like I mentioned in the start of the video, even this code is just using a standard API call. You could actually use a streaming API call here. You could go into the Deepgram developer documentation. You can find the JavaScript SDK, which is like the Deepgram library, and you can use their example and kind of modify it to fit us here, but you could use their example using their SDK, and you could create streaming for this text-to-speech as well. The code would probably be a little bit shorter than this. And if you did do the streaming as well using their SDK or just regular JavaScript, then you would need to come into the GPT service here, and you will definitely need to change some stuff up. You would need to remove this line, which basically, this is how we're trying to speed up the actual API, like the text-to-speech processing here. This is the generated output of the GPT module, or the GPT API call, which is like the responses that we're getting, and then we'll have to convert them to speech using the Deepgram API. And we're using this little bullet point here to denote like a natural break in conversation. So every 5 to 10 words, we're breaking it, we're sending it across to be processed, then we're reading it back to the user out loud. And then while we're reading it back, now we're taking the next 5 to 10 words and we're converting it, and then we're reading it back. And then, yeah, in that first video, I basically explained that if there's, let's say, 50 words, then we're splitting it up to every 10 words, we're taking the that chunk of information, we're converting it, we're reading it back, taking the next chunk to process it faster to kind of simulate more of a real-time conversion. But yeah, this mechanism is what Twilio had, and I think it was predominantly because the streaming API either wasn't available for text-to-speech at the time that they wrote this code, or because it was probably a little bit difficult to plug into the rest of the code, like the app.js. But okay, so now that we've deployed the actual app, we've gone to make.com, we've added the URL, the updated deployed URL there. We've also added the URL to the environment file. Let's give this a run. So just once again, we don't have to hit run here because this is already deployed, now it's live. So if I go to here and I right click and I go to run this module, I'm gonna get my phone out, and is it on loud? Yes, you'll be able to see that I call my number.
Hi, Bart. This is Sophie from Bart's Automotive. I'm calling to help book you in for your car service on Monday, 9 December 2024 at 9 a.m. work for you?
Yes, let's book it in.
Let me check the availability and book that service time for you. Perfect. Your service has been booked for Monday, 9 December 2024 at 9 a.m. We'll see you then. Have a great day.
All right, thank you. See ya. Okay, and there you go. We just ran through one sequence of actually booking this into the calendar. So my calendar over here, I got new booking 4. I don't have the number I don't think the number was passed through over here. There must be some configuration that I need to edit. Yeah, okay, because we're pulling the phone number. We're trying to pull the phone number from app.js into the GPT service so we can pass it through into our function for book service. I'm trying to call that phone number here. Not call the number, we're trying to access the phone number here. So there probably is something that I've done incorrectly here. Once again, just plug it into ChatGPT and say, I've got the phone number accessible in app.js, and it's accessible over here, caller number. Can you just help me bring it into this GPT service and then bring it into the actual function call as well? But if we go over here at a high level, so we receive the time and the date, so 2024, 9th to the 12th at 9 a.m. And we're running through this entire sequence. So I think here we'll have the output of busy times. So we just got one busy time. Initially it was 8 to 9 p.m., which was this over here, weekly meeting, 8 to 9. And that's why that's all we returned for that day as busy times. So back into here, that's cool. And then we would have put it into here and said, do the times clash? Does the time from what we got from the webhook, does this time clash with this time output here? So if I just look at the actual message that we sent in, you received this. Yep, that's the main system prompt, and the user prompt is this. So proposed time is what we got from that webhook, 2024, 12:09 at 9 a.m. Melbourne time. And the busy time, which is now just that one variable that we plugged in, has a start and end time over here. So our output bundle of results will have accepted because it would have went through these certain steps. Yep, make the conversion to UTC, compare the busy time, start and end, to the proposed time, make a conclusive statement, and then is it accepted or is it denied? So the word accept is here, and it would have passed our filter because we had the word accept over here. And then we would have just generated the appropriate start time. So our start time here would have been the UTC equivalent start time, which we then plugged into our calendar. Over here, we had a 1 hour duration, and that's why we just plugged in the start time, 9 a.m., had a 1 hour duration, and it works over here. And then the response back to our function call would have been status, successful, and then booking, and then that time. And once again, in that book service, we just passed that booking time variable right into here. So yeah, booking successful, here is that time that we booked in. That's why we read it back to the user saying, yep, 9 a.m. was booked in for you. Okay, so that's pretty much everything. You guys can now go across to, well, if you've probably been following along with the code that I created, yeah, you can deploy this by yourselves in like the next 10 minutes. If you are a business owner and you want this built out for yourself in a slightly more like a sophisticated way, like you don't want to get your hands dirty, you just want to expand the scope of this AI caller. You want to have different function calling. You might want to use, instead of just Deepgram for text to speech, maybe you want to use 11 Labs, which is another option that we could do as well. If you want to basically build out a more sophisticated AI caller for your own business use, but you don't want to get your hands dirty, I've left my contact information in the description of this video, so you can go ahead and reach out to me and ask me to build something for you as well. All right, guys, thank you very much, and enjoy your totally in-house DIY AI caller that does outbound calls and function calling as well. All right, see ya.